Jay Brandon is the author of a number of novels, mysteries, all set or mostly set in San Antonio, a lot of them downtown. Deadbolt, Tripwire, Predator's Waltz, Fade the Heat, a whole list of novels. But one of the unique experiences he had was writing a serialized novel for the Express News, and that was Milagro Lane. It appeared over the course of a year in weekly installments, and writing a mystery that has, all the interconnections of that kind of genre over the course of a year when you have to produce and everything has to match. That's a difficult writing assignment, I'll tell you. And but a lot of people kept asking Jay, is it going to come out as a book? Because inevitably people missed a piece of it when they were reading. They read several sections and then they were out of town, lost track of what was going on and quit reading. So 10 years later, we decided the book really ought to appear. So that's how this book materialized, out of a serialized novel. So please welcome Jay Brandon.
Thank you. I have been following Bob Flynn for years, ever since I was his student in fiction writing at Trinity, in which he gave me a C. True. Yes, this story, Milagro Lane, appeared in little segments in the Express News, and I wrote it as it went along. So I couldn't go back and add little pieces, as I usually do in a mystery, to pay off later. But luckily, my subconscious mind supplied some things, and I'm going to read you that segment. This is also the dirtiest part of the book, and I feel like I can read this here in the adult section of Luminaria, where I put a line into it which was supposed to be just a little private joke between my editor, Rick Casey, and me, and he would tell me, well, of course we have to cut that. And instead, he got this, and he called me, and his first words were, "I'm going to fight for that line." So, to my surprise, this is a line that appeared in the Express News. Not the first line, but you'll see it when it comes. This is a segment about Veronica Lewis. Remember her name, Veronica Lewis, she's a television reporter who has an ongoing feud with Suzanne Pierce, a lawyer and upcoming politician in San Antonio. Veronica Lewis enjoyed her new reputation as a sharp investigative reporter. Other reporters watched her closely, as at a City Hall news conference when Veronica began questioning District Councilman Suzanne Pierce. Ms. Pierce, a corporate attorney, had a tight grip on the lead for next mayor of San Antonio. "Ms. Pierce, would you release your billing records if asked to do so?" Veronica asked brightly. "While I believe wholeheartedly in the concept of full disclosure, I owe discretion to my clients, and the city attorney has ruled that my billing records are not a matter of public record." Veronica made a note in her notebook. Since everything she said or heard was recorded on videotape, the notebook was pretty much useless, but she thought it added the perfect touch to her image as a gutsy reporter. Later, she goes to interview Suzanne Pierce in her private office and says, "I'd still like to talk about those billing records. I talked to the former managing partner of your firm, Branch Richmond. He's a wonderful old gentleman, isn't he? Charming way with a story." "Yes, he's become quite the raconteur since he lost his mind," Suzanne Pierce said acidly. "Some of his old friends said he had an epiphany of honesty since he retired. His specialist calls it early onset of Alzheimer's. At any rate, he talks quite freely about any subject. Told me, for example, about coming into your office one day unexpectedly and finding you in a compromising and quite athletic, according to him, position with an important client. Later, he checked your hours and found you'd billed the client for your time during that hour." "Are you calling me something?" Miss Pierce asked tightly. "Not yet. Mr. Richmond called it the sign of a good lawyer. Takes a drilling and keeps on billing," was the way he phrased it. "That would be between me and the client, wouldn't it?" "Yes, but your other billing records would be more interesting to voters, such as the several times you billed a client for time during city council meetings you attended." Suzanne Pierce stared silently, then said slowly and deliberately, "I have dual thought processes. It's a rare attribute shared by many of the nation's great lawyers. I can think about more than one thing at a time. While someone is droning on about city billing records, for example, I'll bet you can talk out of both sides of your mouth at the same time, too," Veronica smiled. She imagined it a very sly, smart smile and wished she had a camera on her. "I can't wait to hear you explain this dual processes thing to the voters." "You know, your revealing this could cost me the mayor's race, but let me tell you, Veronica, it would be the city's loss, not mine. I would make the best mayor this city has had in a quarter century." Veronica smiled attentively. Ms. Pierce said, "But that's not as important as sweeps month, is it?" Veronica thought Suzanne Pierce would have made a perfectly ordinary mayor, since she had a habit of saying out loud the perfectly obvious, as most politicians. Okay, Suzanne Pierce does get elected in spite of Veronica Pierce, and Veronica doesn't fare nearly as well since she had a problem with endorsing with a puff piece she did about another candidate who you'll hear. Veronica Lewis didn't fare nearly as well. Her news director, Roger Boyd, didn't raise his voice. He just stared at her across the desk. "You as good as endorsed him," Roger finally said. "No, it was a news piece. The most glowing profile we did of any candidate. I heard great things about him." "Yes, Veronica, but in the news business, we feel that an in-depth investigative report that fails to uncover that the subject doesn't actually exist is not exactly Pulitzer material." Veronica looked down. I'm very sorry." "Yeah, practice that line. Here's my idea. You're going to do an on-air apology. And then pull out a knife and commit ritual harakiri on the air." Roger pondered. "I like the visual. But no, now that you've told me about it, I foresee potential legal problems. Plus, we could probably only use the footage once. Now, here's my idea. You're going back to the miners. Get a job in Midland or Lubbock. They're nice places. I've flown over them a couple of times. I prefer the public disembowelment. Well, we'll keep your plan in the back of our minds." And finally, once Suzanne Pierce is the mayor of San Antonio, Veronica Lewis has decided to get back at her and has spent all the intervening time uncovering something about her that Suzanne Pierce would rather the public not know. But Veronica has discovered something that Suzanne didn't even know, which was that someone had been blackmailing her with false material, and forged that document and has been holding it over your head ever since, she tells Suzanne in a private meeting. "And now you will." Pierce's mind was reeling, but she reverted to cynicism. Veronica shook her head. She popped open her old-fashioned video camera and handed the tape to Pierce. Pierce's stare asked a question. Embarrassed, not looking her in the eye, Veronica said, "The whole thing is so sleazy it makes my skin crawl. I don't like the way I think it would play out. He used your vulnerability as a woman against you. That's how too many people would look at it." She shrugged and looked her antagonist in the eye. "I don't like the way it plays." Holding the tape, Pierce stared at her, waiting for the punchline. "You do what you want," Veronica said more briskly. "If it were me, I'd make a date with the bastard and have the cops waiting. You haven't violated any laws, but he has. Forgery and blackmail for a minimum." "I've misjudged you, Lewis. I thought you were only in anything for your 3 minutes of fame every night." "Yeah, well," Veronica smiled brightly. "If you wanted an extra guest at the arrest, you could have me there for an exclusive." Suzanne Pierce smiled. She put her arm around the other woman's shoulder and led her out of the office. "Lewis," she said, "I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship."